Sal, what's up, brother? It's great to see you again. I've had the fortune of talking with a lot of powerful men, but I really, really enjoy our conversations because they're always kind of on the same page, but you challenge me in a different way. Anyways, it's good to have a conversation, man.
Yeah, no, I always appreciate talking to you. Very stimulating, and you have a great podcast. Love what you do. So anytime you invite me on, man, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. How's the podcast been going for you guys? I mean, what do we met, what, 3 or 4 years ago now? But you guys continue to do incredible work.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 4 years, and we're growing every month over month, having a lot of fun. Not doing anything too different from what we did as trainers and coaches and gym owners, just doing it on a broader scale. And what we found to be effective as trainers is translated very well to this space. So we've been very fortunate in that way.
Well, the thing I appreciate about what you guys are doing, because look, I've got your book. You sent it to me, the Resistance Training Revolution, excuse me. And there's a lot of exercises in here, which are good, but at the risk of, and I don't want to be offensive here, but the risk of sounding maybe offensive is like everybody seems to know what to do, but nobody does it. and and that's where I really appreciate our conversations. It's like, all right, cool, we got some exercises in here, but why in the hell are men not doing what it is they know they should be doing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A big part of the problem is exactly what you're saying. Now, another, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the roots as to why people don't do what they know to be effective, what they know to be, what works. But the other problem, and believe it or not, and sometimes we forget this because we tend to be in our own bubble or our own space, a lot of people still don't know what to do. From in the fitness space, if we're talking about health and fitness, most people know they need to exercise. They know that there's benefits to exercise. Okay.
Sure.
But most average people still don't know that resistance training or strength training is the single most effective form of exercise for what most people's goals are. They still don't know that. They've been sold something else. They've been told something else, and they think that strength training is just for guys who want to get big muscles or girls who want to look bulky, but it doesn't help with fat loss as much as cardio, or it doesn't contribute to longevity and health, maybe performance. Most everyday people still think that. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to even guys who've gone to the doctor, and the doctor would tell them that their blood lipids are off, their cholesterol or triglycerides aren't looking so good. So they decide that they're going to start exercising, and I'll suggest resistance training. Oh, no, I don't want to get big. I just want to lose weight and get healthy. So there's still a ton of misinformation that's out there. And this is one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, is I'm trying to explain to the average person, not the fitness fanatic or the person who's in the know, but the average person, which is still the majority of people, on how resistance training is when it comes to health, longevity, fat loss, brain health, especially in the context of modern life, which is sedentary modern life, which includes lots of easily accessible, hyperpalatable foods, and the context, which includes the fact that most people will probably never be more consistent than maybe 2 or 3 days a week of exercise. When you consider all of those things, resistance training is just the best form of exercise. And so that was the goal of that book. So still talking to a lot of people and trying to inform.
So let's back up a second.
Sure.
Then, if because you're saying, okay, so a lot of people don't know. Let's just back up, rudimentary, basic level. What is resistance training? Like, what at its foundational level does that even mean? And
Yeah.
what are other people doing that they think is resistance training or think is improving their situation, but really just isn't?
No, that's a great question. So resistance training is not just working out with resistance. Resistance training is using resistance for the specific purpose of building muscle and strength, or any specific way to build muscle and strength. So I could use dumbbells and barbells in a way that makes it cardio, and that does not make it resistance training. There are a few aspects of resistance training in the way that I'm talking about it that make it, what I'm explaining. One is rest periods in between sets. The other one is to use sufficient amount of resistance or tension The third thing would be to work within rep ranges between, maybe 1 rep, as low as 1 rep, all the way as high as maybe 25 reps. And then there's a certain amount of intensity. Those are kind of the basic things that make resistance training. Now, what are people doing instead? Well, we have to kind of start with is the old paradigm that we've been told for a long time that is really not just not helping us, but is actually contributing to the problem of obesity and chronic health issues. So if we look at modern societies, we notice some pretty specific, or, should I say, certain health issues that characterize modern life more than anything else, right? So obesity being one of them. If you don't live in a modern society, obesity is probably not an issue. Getting food is not is a big concern. You're probably super active because that's what you have to be in order to survive. But in lots of food, we're very sedentary. And so obesity is a big problem. And that's an umbrella issue that contributes to lots of other issues, chronic health issues. So autoimmune issues is another one. Dementia and Alzheimer's would be another one. Diabetes, osteoporosis. These are all health issues that kind of characterize modern societies. Now, what the old paradigm said was, okay, in order to lose weight, in order to solve this issue, we need to take in less calories than we burn, or to put differently, we need to burn more calories than we take in. And that's accurate. Right. That's actually true. It's a law of thermodynamics. It's a law of physics. You can't get around it. So I don't care what diet you choose. I don't care if you eat paleo or keto or carnivore or vegan or whatever. If you want to lose weight, you have to take in less calories than you burn.
Now, here's a simple equation of energy is really all it is. Is like if you've got this much energy to consume and you're consuming this much, and you either have a surplus or a deficit, period, end of story. That's it.
Correct. Now, of course, it's a little more complicated in terms of how you feel and what's sustainable and all that stuff.
Right.
But that rule is a rule. Now, here's the false part of that old paradigm is they look at the energy in side of this equation, and then they look at the energy outside of the equation, and they say, okay, it's beneficial to burn more calories. So let's look at exercise, and let's value exercise by how many calories you burn while doing it. This is the primary value of exercise from their standpoint, because you want to burn more calories, right? So, okay, let's take all the forms of exercise that we could possibly do, and the most valuable forms have to be the ones that burn the most calories. Now, there's a big problem.
So let me back up on that a little bit, sure. Sal. Let me just pause you on that. So, like, if I was going to compare two, we'll just say two exercises. Let's take jujitsu versus strength training.
Yes.
The old paradigm, what you're saying is that if I was going to do an hour of jujitsu versus an hour of strength training, that the more beneficiary one, based on the old paradigm, would be whatever one was going to burn the most calories, period. That's it. That's all we're taking into consideration.
100%. And this is what they've always promoted, right? In fact, I mean, cardio machines do this. You get on a piece of cardio, they advertise how many calories are burned, which, by the way, they're totally overestimating. But it's always like, and if you look at mainstream fitness programs, sold by, fitness entertainers and, hucksters, it's, burn 1,000 calories or burn 600 calories or burn more calories. So it's all about that. Now, the problem with that, and I'll explain why, is that that's actually the least valuable aspect of exercise. We shouldn't focus on that at all. The main value of exercise is, how does this form of exercise get my body to adapt? And then what does that mean? Okay. What does
adapt to what? What is exactly? That was my next question.
Yeah. Like, okay, so I do this form of exercise, I get better at it, AKA my body adapts. And then what does that mean? So let's start with the form of exercise that most people associate with fat loss, most people associate with longevity, most people associate with health. And even the medical community for a long time has recommended as the primary form of exercise for health, longevity, and fat loss, which is cardiovascular activity. Now, cardiovascular activity would be running, swimming, biking, those forms of exercise. And they do burn the most calories per time spent versus other forms of exercise. So in that context, yeah, they do burn more calories. But again, they're ignoring the most important part, which is the adaptation that that form of exercise induces in the body, or that any form of exercise induces in the body. So if we look at it from that standpoint, cardiovascular activity, the way your body gets better at it is it tries to improve its endurance. It tries to also become more efficient at energy usage, right? So it's trying to become more efficient with the calories that it's using. So think of it this way. Imagine if, Elon Musk invented an AI car that could adapt and mold itself to your driving habits. Okay. So, and every day you drive 250 miles at 30 miles an hour. So you're simulating what endurance exercise would look like, right? What would this car turn into? It would become a very low horsepower, low energy using vehicle. It would conserve as much energy as possible. You're not demanding lots of power. What you're demanding out of that car is lots of stamina and endurance in essence, right?
Efficiency, essentially.
Exactly. This is what happens to your body when you do lots and lots of cardiovascular activity. Now, this isn't just my anecdote or my experience, which I have lots of anecdotal experience to support this. This is supported by scientific study. If you look at the science and studies on cardio plus diet for weight loss, what you find typically is generally about half of the weight that is lost is coming from muscle. Okay. Now, it's not because the body is burning muscle. That's not what's happening. That's actually quite a difficult process. So it's not that it's burning muscle for energy, but rather it's paring muscle down to make you a more efficient, more effective cardio machine. Because your body.
Hold on a second on this one. So,
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to wrap my head around this because these are things I'm personally dealing with. So the way that I understand it, and this is anecdotally, this is just intuitively, so you're going to correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm sure I am. But it seems to me that the body has evolved to store fat and to expend as little calories as possible over tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Like, we want to preserve energy, we want to expend nothing, and we want to store fat so that if we're in a famine for the next 30 days, we're going to survive. And it seems to me that, again, this is just anecdotally, my body just loves to store a little fat around the midsection because you never know when it's going to be 30 days before my next meal. Although in modern times, I'm going to have a meal in 5 hours.
Yes. Yeah. So our bodies are adaptation machines. And if you look at the stresses that humans have been under for the vast majority of human history, not like 30% of human history, but 99.9%. Really, obesity is only really a problem that we've really had to deal with over the last, 6 or 7 decades, right? Before that was not an issue. If you were a king, you might be a little overweight, but that's it. Everybody else.
Right.
Obesity
was building pyramids and everything else, so you didn't have to worry about that issue.
Hello. For most of human history, our bodies dealt with this calorie and energy issue. In fact, there's a study that I bring up in the book, and there's actually other studies that have been very similar. But my favorite one was done on the Hadza tribe of northern Tanzania. These are modern hunter-gatherers. And so they live the way humans lived thousands of years ago, right? They don't have electronics. They gather roots and seeds and naturally growing fruit if they find any. And a majority of their calories come from hunting. And the way they hunt is the way that we probably hunted. We're really, really good at throwing with accuracy. So there's a couple things that humans do better than any animal, right? We can throw with incredible accuracy, and we have incredible stamina in comparison to other animals. I know a lot of people don't realize that, but we can out-trek almost any animal. And so the way that we hunt is we throw a spear at an animal, we wound it, and then we run after it until it gets tired, and then we kill it.
Right. We just wear it down. Sure.
Wear it down.
Persistence hunting.
This is just how we did it. And we work together and we try to trap the animal nonetheless, but we just moving constantly. So scientists went and studied the Hadza tribe, and through some pretty sophisticated testing, wanted to see how many calories they burned on a daily basis. And they theorized that they must be burning way more calories than the average Western couch potato. I mean, they're moving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What they found was pretty remarkable. The Hadza tribes people burned similar amounts of calories to your average couch potato. Now, at first you think, how is this possible? I mean, these people are taking 50,000, 100,000 steps a day. And here we are, 2,000, 3,000 steps a day, barely moving. Right. This is insane. But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. It makes no sense for hunter-gatherers to burn 10 or 15,000 calories a day. We would have never survived. It's impossible to find that much energy in nature. So the body learns to become extremely efficient. And this is exactly what we find with the studies on cardiovascular activity. When you do lots of cardio, initially you burn a lot of calories, but your body pares muscle down to become more efficient. And over time, you slow your metabolism down. So this is what weight loss looks like when you do cardio plus diet. And and the reason why I'm explaining this is because I guarantee a majority of your listeners have gone through this process.
But hold on a second on this. So here's my question. If we've evolved this way, like, again, I go back to jujitsu because this is something I've been heavily involved with for the past couple of years. What I'm understanding you say is that we've evolved to be less jacked and more leaner, more efficient machines. So does it make sense to get jacked? Does that make sense how I'm asking that?
No, 100%. It makes sense because we have to, if we want to be smart, we have to modify our behaviors to fit our environment. And our environment is not like it was 100,000 years ago. It just isn't. We are surrounded by easily accessible food. Our lives are naturally sedentary. We've done a great job.
But am I better off being leaner and stronger in the environment that I'm likely to face than being this 250-pound swole dude who can't, move his neck? Now, I know that's a false dichotomy, but I want to present that to the guys. Like, is the ultimate result to be this guy who looks like a Greek god, or is it to be that individual who's lean and tight and strong, low body fat, and can move and maneuver and do everything he needs to do?
Yeah. So let's not use the extreme of the 250-pound bodybuilder. That's any extreme in any endeavor is probably not healthy, whether it's extreme endurance, or extreme strength, or anything like that. So let's not use that comparison. But no, if we could model our lives entirely around the way that we evolved, we probably would have the best of all worlds. Now, the problem with that is I'm not communicating to the person who prioritizes longevity and health above all things and who's willing to go to extremes to achieve that, because that would require a lot of planning, and we're not going to get that. Here's the deal, Ryan. Maybe you might do this. You're a very determined, motivated individual.
No, I won't. We're talking about Ben Greenfield here. It's definitely not me. Okay. Yeah. So let's just get that out of the way.
Okay. So we're not going to get the average. This is just not going to work for the average person. It just isn't. So what we need to look at is, all right, in the context of the way people live and the fact that, and this is my experience. Okay. I got at getting people who never worked out to become consistent for the rest of their lives. And here's the best I ever got, Ryan. 2 or 3 days a week. That's the most I ever got out of anybody long-term. I could not take the average person and turn them into a fitness fanatic. That was rare. Most people went from never exercising to, if I did a good job, 2 or 3 days a week of structured exercise for the rest of their lives. Okay. That's the most we can hope for. So that's what we have to work with, right? So to give you another example, I could say, here's your bet. You should always avoid any food that's unhealthy, any alcohol. You should avoid any vice that is unhealthy at all, right? Is that realistic? No, it's not realistic. I mean, that's true. That would be a perfect scenario, so long as you don't become an orthorexic. But it's
What is
unreal.
that? I don't even know what that is.
Orthorexia is a dysfunctional relationship with health and food, to where, so you have anorexia, right? Where you
So
just
it's a
don't,
mental issue.
it's a mental issue where everything has to be healthy and perfect, and it creates a tremendous amount of stress. And anything outside of that is triggering, causes anxiety. I avoid relationships with people. I don't go to birthdays. That's all I do is obsess over eating perfect. And
Yeah,
it's
it
very
sounds like an obsessive compulsive sort of disorder is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and by the way, Stanford actually did a study on this. They showed that having bad relationships with people was as bad for your health as smoking. I think it was something like 15 cigarettes a day. So
How do they define bad relationships with people? What does that mean?
people who, when they fill out surveys, who don't have good relationships with friends, family, or have no relationships, who tend to be isolated.
Loners.
Yes,
Right.
they tend to have very bad health, right? So, and the reason why that's important to communicate is obsessing over perfect health can, in one hand, yeah, you got the perfect eating and exercise, but on the other hand, you actually may be causing yourself harm because you eschew other things that are also important for health.
Well, there's a cost to it, right? And you and I have had, I mean, hours and hours of conversations, but there's a cost associated with diet, with exercise, with taking things to the extreme. All of the things that everybody would hear and say, well, that's a good thing. There's still a cost associated with it. And we have to know what the cost is and whether or not we're willing to pay the price.
That's right. And I believe that the only way to achieve sustainability is to enjoy that process, or at least to value that process in real ways, right? So if somebody is viewing exercise and someone is viewing eating right as torture, as punishment, the odds that they'll stay consistent and successful with it are super low. This is one of
Unless
the
you're a weird guy like David Goggins, which I'm not. I'm not going to speak for you, but 99.9% of the population is not David Goggins, where they're a bit of a masochist who just loves to feel the pain or whatever. Like, I'm not like that. I don't want to experience that, and it doesn't sound enjoyable to me.
It doesn't, and I think he identifies a lot with it. It's part of his brand, so who knows? But you're absolutely right. Like, I don't want to, I think it's important, for example, to be loyal to your wife and to be a good father. But I don't think it's a great idea to do it and hate it the whole damn time, and to be like, and to miss being a single bachelor, and oh God, I wish I didn't have kids. Like, I mean, I could see some virtue in doing what's right, even though you hate it. But I think learning to value it and finding ways to enjoy the process is the best approach. And I approach exercise and health and nutrition that way. That's why when you listen to my podcast, what you don't hear are fitness zealots. This is why you hear us talk about things like how to enjoy yourself, how to find balance. We talk about, that we'll hang out together and drink, or occasionally enjoy a joint. Like, is smoking a joint healthy for my body? No. Are there healthy ways to utilize these things? I think if you look at the greater context, there are. I think being consistent with exercise is great too. Do I think it's good for you to do it in replace of going to your kid's football game? No. So I and all really the angle that I'm coming from when I communicate the values of resistance training. It's in a perfect world, I think there's daily exercise, and there's components of flexibility, endurance, strength, mobility. I think there's a meditation or prayer practice. I think your food is never processed. I think it's always grown by you, and you're part of that process. I think you hunt some of your food because there's value in that. Is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. It's unrealistic to even push that to the average person. What I'm trying to do is be as effective as possible, knowing what I know in terms of how often people are going to work out, and knowing what I know about how people live, again, in modern societies.
Well, I think that's what you guys do so great is you talked about drinking or smoking a joint is you're not making any sort of justification by playing these mental gymnastics by saying this is
Yeah.
good for your body. You're saying, no, this is not probably good, but you know what? I enjoy drinking a beer with the guys. And in the meantime, the other 90% or 80% or whatever the ratio is of my time is going to be spent doing things that are productive and healthy and good and wholesome. And the other 20%, I'm going to live a little and enjoy what life has to offer.
Absolutely. Look, it's like I'll simplify it, right? If the inexperienced trainer version of myself, let's say a person came up to me, this is before I really knew what I was doing. And by the way, it took me 5 years at least to become effective as a trainer. It took a long time. But the inexperienced version of myself, let's say somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Sal, there's two forms of exercise I'm going to choose from to do first thing in the morning. I can either swim in my cold swimming pool, or I could, walk on my treadmill. Which one do you think is better?" Now, the inexperienced trainer would say, "Oh, you should swim. It's better for your whole body. It works everything. The cold water does all this for you and that for you." The experienced trainer would say this: "Which one do you enjoy more?" Now, why would I say that? Because I know that the one that they enjoy more is the one they're probably most likely to stick to. That if they did a form of exercise that they hated, I don't care how valuable and effective it is, if they stop doing it, it's worth nothing, right? So that's where I'm coming from.
This is the what I would call the CrossFit argument. I hear a lot of guys, and maybe you too, I don't know, would say, well, CrossFit's not the best because people get hurt and this and that, and like all these things about why CrossFit isn't the best. Well, I did CrossFit for about 5 years, solid, consistent. And there isn't another thing outside of jujitsu, which I found over the past 2 to 3 years. There isn't another thing that I found more engaging and kept me coming back than CrossFit. So you're telling me CrossFit is horrible, and yet it's the only thing in 4 decades of being on this planet that kept me engaged for 5 whole years consistent. How could that be bad?
Exactly. 100%. If the the question was CrossFit or not exercising or exercising very inconsistently, well, I think the answer is obvious, right? Which form of exercise is best. And that's true for all of them. And I do want to be clear, because as we continue this conversation, I'll be explaining why, one form of exercise is superior, why it's the one that we need to promote, and why other forms of exercise are inferior. I want to be very clear. All forms of activity have value so long as they're applied appropriately. All of them. Okay. And I say appropriately because you can overdo anything, or you can apply anything inappropriately, in which case it'll not be good for you. But all forms of activity, if applied appropriately, have value. So I want to be clear, because sometimes I'll get labeled as anti-cardio, or, oh, you just like meathead workouts. Not true. Not true at all. It's all about the one that is going to be the most effective, considering all those things I talked about. I'm talking to the general population, but if you put me in front of an individual, that conversation can change dramatically, because at the end of the day, it's about which one are you going to be most likely to do, which one brings you the most value, which one do you enjoy the most, which one helps you stay the most consistent.
Well, and I think social media has done a phenomenal job in giving us accessibility to everybody, but it's also created this world where it's all about false dichotomies, where you're either a runner or a swimmer or martial arts or a strength trainer, or it's like, there's probably an infinite number of variables and percentages that lie in between the extremes, and that's what I hear you say is it's not the false dichotomies.
Yes. And what I'm trying to do, again, I'm talking to people who mainstream everyday, my aunt or my neighbor, who still thinks that if they touch weights they're going to blow up and look like Arnold, or that that they just got to burn calories, that's the best way to exercise. Those are the people that I'm talking to. And what I'm trying to do is educate them, because oftentimes they make those choices based on false information. Mm-hmm. And when they get the right information, they can make better choices. Or at the very least, Ryan, they can understand what the hell's going on. Why isn't this working anymore? That example I gave earlier, which this is the one that's pushed. You want to lose weight, you want to be healthy, eat less, do lots of cardio. If you go exercise, do lots of cardio. That's
Well,
what's
you
being
lose
pushed.
weight, but you may not be healthy. But you'll definitely lose weight. There's no doubt.
Well, here's what happens. You lose muscle initially, your metabolism slows down. So this is what happens. You lose weight at first, then you plateau real hard. Now to move any further, you got to cut more calories or exercise more. Then you lose a little more, and then you plateau again. At the end of this road is I lost the weight, but now I've got this much slower metabolism, and it's very challenging to maintain. On the other end of the spectrum, if we do these the way that I explained, what I'm doing is the weight loss starts off a little slower, primarily because it's pure fat that you lose. When you do strength training, you either build muscle or at the very least you maintain it. But
So what you're saying is you're not losing fat and muscle. You're primarily losing fat, which doesn't accelerate the weight loss, which is different than the health aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could cut your leg off and lose weight immediately, right?
Yeah, great point. Great point.
Yeah, and so the weight loss starts a little slower, but it starts to snowball as your metabolism ramps up, as it speeds up. And at the end of that road, you're leaner, you lost the body fat, you're much smaller, tighter, the whole thing, but you have a faster metabolism. What a great position to be in, right? Imagine losing 15 pounds, but now eating more, right? That is a winning formula, if there is one, when we're considering, the context of modern life. We talked about how we evolved and how our bodies want to be efficient. A metabolism that's efficient was very valuable 50,000 years ago. That's a great thing to have a metabolism that is very good at conserving energy and storing it. Today, a metabolism that's fast is valuable. One that burns things. That's what's valuable now, not the other way around. In fact, we've been told things like sugar and inflammatory fats and certain foods are unhealthy for us. But you want to know what's funny is so much of the damage that certain foods cause the body are negated when you burn it off. They've done studies where they'll show people eat a high sugar diet, but because they're in a calorie deficit, their cholesterol improves, their inflammation goes down, they're healthier. Now, would they be healthier if they didn't eat a higher sugar diet? I argue yes.
Of course. Right, sure.
But my point is, one of the best buffers that we have, one of the best ways to block or at least mitigate the damage that is caused by living in these societies that we've created, is to have a metabolism that's roaring hot. If I can get away with eating 3,000 calories a day because my body is burning it on its own, I'm going to be healthier than if my body metabolism was slower and I ate that same amount of calories.
Well, and not to mention, you probably enjoy life a little bit more if you had, 4 slices of pizza, but you knew your body was going to burn it. Yeah, I can have the 4 slices of pizza. And I think there's actually something to be said for that.
You're 100% right. It's like, I used to get this from people, right? They go on a vacation with their wife or their husband, and they come back and be like, man, I feel like I erased 5 months of exercise off of 1 week. Like I gained body fat. I don't feel good. That's because their metabolism was slow. It wasn't able to buffer against, the occasional vacation. And imagine this, you come back from vacation, you're like, wow, it's really weird. I was eating at the buffet. We were enjoying some alcohol. My body seemed to be okay. Like I didn't seem to gain that much. I feel pretty good. Like that's great. Right. So, that's kind of what I'm trying to provide here with what I'm talking about. And again, if you want to get deeper, and, one of my favorite conversations around this, Ryan, revolve around longevity and hormones, because these were two things that were relatively unknown until recently in terms of the benefits of resistance training. Longevity in particular, we had no studies. We just didn't have any studies to show the longevity benefits of resistance training. They just weren't done. Anytime we did a study on exercise and health, it was cardio. That's just what we picked. The only studies that were done on resistance training were revolved around performance. Well, we now have studies on what we find. We'll start with Alzheimer's. That's a good one, right? Alzheimer's is, some people will call it type 3 diabetes. This is growing. It's exploding. This is an issue that we see primarily in first world, modern societies. Only one form of exercise has been shown to stop the progression of Alzheimer's. Only one. In fact, it's the only non-medical intervention that's been shown to stop the progression of these beta amyloid plaques that build up in the brain. There was a study done out of Sydney, Australia, and it was resistance training. Nothing else has been shown to date to be as effective. Now, you know how I said it was, some people call it type 3 diabetes? They think, and I think, one of the reasons why this is so effective is because it's nothing sensitizes your body to insulin as quickly as building a little bit of muscle. Nothing. Nothing will make your body as sensitive to insulin as just gaining a little bit of muscle. In fact, they've done studies on the obese, the severely obese, have them lose no weight, just have them gain a little bit of muscle, and we see significant improvement in insulin sensitivity. Muscle is this hormone sensitive, metabolically active tissue that also stores glycogen, right? Glycogen coming from carbohydrates and sugars. So it's like you increase the gas tank at which you can store these carbohydrates and sugars and directly improve insulin sensitivity. And many people believe this is why resistance training is showing to be one of the best ways to prevent the degeneration, the Alzheimer's and dementia, for example, or issues with cognitive function. Let's talk about hormones. This is a big one. This is one of my favorite ones because this one's the most interesting and one of the most recent. Resistance training or strength training is the only pro-tissue form of exercise. Okay. All other forms of exercise, primarily cardiovascular activity, is anti-tissue. So what does that mean? The main adaptation, right? The main thing that resistance training or strength training is telling your body to do is to add active tissue or build muscle.
Right.
When I do lots of cardiovascular activity, the main adaptations are to lose muscle along with body fat and all that stuff, right? But to become
more efficient.
Correct. Get rid of this active tissue. Now, let's think of the hormones associated with losing muscle and the hormones associated with gaining muscle. If my body has this signal that says we need to build, if I'm a man and my body is getting a signal that says we need to build muscle, it's going to raise its testosterone.
Right, of course.
The only form of exercise that reliably raises testosterone in all men, low testosterone men, high testosterone men, doesn't matter. The only form of exercise that raises testosterone reliably is resistance training. It's also the only form of exercise that's been shown to reliably increase androgen receptor density. So these are the receptors that testosterone attaches to.
Right.
We talked about insulin sensitivity, improves insulin sensitivity. It raises growth hormone levels at the baseline, lowers cortisol, right? Cortisol can burn muscle, or at least prevent you from gaining muscle. In women, you see this balancing of estrogen and progesterone. In essence, it promotes this youthful spectrum of hormones in our body. Now let's go to the lose muscle equation. When my body's trying to lose muscle, it's very difficult to do that if my testosterone levels are high. So what do we see in studies with lots of cardio? Reliable lowering of testosterone in men. This is what you see. Why does it lower testosterone? Because it makes it easier to get the body. Now, it's not going to hammer your testosterone. It might if you abuse your body, but you'll see
it may hamper it.
Correct. It'll lower it though. We see cortisol levels start to rise, relatively consistently. Estrogen or progesterone, especially if abused, we start to see imbalance in women. So essentially, your body is priming itself to lose muscle or gain muscle. Okay. How is this important for today? What are we in an epidemic of right now, in men in particular? What have we observed over the last, 6 decades consistently? A consistent across the board lowering of testosterone. This has been happening. We've observed this now for decades. Today, a 30-year-old man average will have the testosterone levels of a 60-year-old in the 1980s. This is true. This is actually becoming quite an issue.
Do you attribute that to something going on with strength training or other things like you talked about androgen blockers and things like that. And we see that in soaps and different products and plastics and everything else. Do you attribute it to that, or do you attribute it to not working out? Like, what do you actually attribute that loss of testosterone on average in men over the past 50 to 60 years?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. It's very likely. I've spoke to a few experts on the subject, and it's very likely a combination of all of those things. So we have xenoestrogens, which are just everywhere. These are chemicals that act like estrogens, or at least they have some kind of affinity for the estrogen receptors in the body. We have chemicals that can lower testosterone in men, less physical activity. So we're just weaker. They did a study on college-aged men. I think it was about 4 years ago, where they tested their grip strength. Mm-hmm. And the average college-aged man today has the grip strength of a 65-year-old, something like 3 decades ago. So
really,
it's true. So we're just weaker. So that contributes. Testosterone is a very reactive hormone. In other words, if a man is in a competitive environment, you often see it rise. If you lose a competition, you see it lower. So it tends to be moldable to the environment as well.
It's funny because I made a shirt and I called it the Testosterone Booster. And on the back of it, I don't know if you ever saw it, but it said, I think it said, eat meat, lift heavy. I'm trying to remember all that it said, but eat meat, lift heavy, have sex, compete, win, be manly, or something like that. And I had so many men and women, who mostly men actually, who were so offended by the shirt.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that all of what I said, now maybe I said it in a short way, but all of what I said has been clinically proven to boost and increase testosterone. But I had so many men get offended and upset about that shirt. It was actually kind of comical and funny, which is why I made the shirt in the first place.
Yeah, it's been politicized. That's why it's so silly.
Yeah, great point.
It's been politicized. Everything's been politicized, right? I'll give you one more thing. This is my theory, and funny things, I brought this up to. So we had Carol Hooven on the podcast recently. She wrote the book. It's called Testosterone, the Hormone That Divides Us. Phenomenal guest. In fact, I think she would be great on your pod. I think you would interview her brilliantly. She's an expert. And I asked her the following. There's studies that show that when women are on birth control, they prefer men who have less visible signs of high testosterone. When they're not on birth control, they prefer men with more visible signs of testosterone. So how do they make this test? They take faces and then they digitally masculinize them a little bit, or they digitally feminize them a little bit. So it's the same face, right? So feminized, so softer lines.
Softer lines, softer cheeks, no facial hair, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and then they'll masculinize it, right? So they'll show, and it's subtle, but you can see the difference. When women are on birth control, they reliably will pick the more feminized face. When they're not on birth control, especially when they're ovulating, they want the more masculinized version.
So what I'm hearing you say in this is that if you want to be more attractive to the ladies, then you need to be more masculine, and you need to boost testosterone, and you need to get involved with resistance training. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. Well, at least if you want to be more attractive to women not on birth control. But here was part of my
good point.
And now here's part of my theory that I brought up to Carol, and she thought it was fascinating. We've had birth control widely available now for, I don't know how many decades now, 6 decades or so. Perhaps women are, because birth control is so widely used, perhaps they're selecting men with lower testosterone over these decades. Because when it's funny, here's another study that you'll like. When women meet a man and marry him on birth control and then go off, the divorce rate spikes. Her preferences change a little bit.
Hold on. Let me wrap my head around that. So they marry a man while they're on birth control, then they get off of birth control, and the divorce rates go up because the man is more feminine than masculine. Is that what you're saying?
The theory is that perhaps they were attracted to the man because their hormones were altered by birth control. And then when they went off, they now didn't find him as appealing or as attractive. That's the theory.
I would wonder if you saw infidelity issues with more masculine looking men in that situation. I mean, anecdotally, I would say yes, of course, but I'd be really curious about that, is that if the woman will be attracted to a more masculine man. It seems to me that yes, the obvious answer would be yes, of course.
Yeah. What's funny about that is they try to connect higher testosterone to infidelity, to aggression, to all these, bad traits. But the reality is, and we're talking about within healthy ranges, right? Higher testosterone contributes to more calm, steady moods, to men who tend to be more productive and have more drive. Infidelity tends to be connected more to men who don't take responsibility. I mean, you know this better than I do. You know some of these studies. So they do try to connect testosterone to a lot of bad things, but the reality is testosterone. Lots of men okay, this is true now. Low testosterone is connected to irritability and aggression more than high testosterone, so long as it's within the normal range, right? We're not talking about these bodybuilding, pro bodybuilder ranges, which
right.
we don't know what that looks like. There's no studies on that. We can only assume. But within healthy ranges,
also manufactured, I think, a lot too. We're taking testosterone replacement therapy, that sort of thing. So a lot of that is not natural. It seems to me that it's more fabricated and manufactured than naturally improved.
Oh yeah, like low testosterone, anxiety, less drive, irritability. When you take those same men and you bring their testosterone levels up to, a high normal, healthy, they reduce their anxiety. They are in better moods, more calm. So, I mean, that's a good side note, right? That, and again, this is probably stuff you talk about on your show. The testosterone has been demonized as this bad hormone. It's not.
It's been misinterpreted. Like you see things from, for example, the American Psychological Association, who comes out and says things that we would traditionally associate with testosterone and masculinity, like stoicism or competitiveness or aggression or dominance. And we just automatically assume or assign negative meaning to aggression or negative meaning to competitiveness or stoicism. But, when you take a step back, you really think about stoicism, the ability to read and control your emotions. Is that a negative thing? Or competitiveness, the desire to improve yourself, to get better, to make yourself more capable so that you can compete more effectively. Is that a negative thing? No, it's not negative, but it's misinterpreted as being negative.
Absolutely. And there are, dark sides, or should I say dysfunctional versions of every
Of
emotion
course.
and feeling. Again, I talked again to this person I brought up, Carol Hooven. I brought this up to her. I said, because she brought up toxic masculinity. She says it's ridiculous. It's why I know you'd love her as a guest. And I said, what's funny? I said, if you look at dysfunctional behaviors that maybe come from traditional male behaviors, or at least associated with them, things like violence and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I said, you can also see that with traditional female, traits. For example,
sure. Yeah.
For example, I don't remember what this is called. I think it's called Munchausen, or when a person will literally slowly else to their child always needs them to take care of them, right? That's almost entirely a female thing. You don't see men do this. This is dysfunctional, empathy or dysfunctional caretaking, right? They poison their kid slowly because they want the kid to need them so they can take care of them, right? So there's dysfunctional versions of every single trait, but healthy versions of these traits, they're all good. There's nothing wrong with them. We want them.
Right. I think it's a matter of making sure that we understand when we're taking things too far, or like I said earlier, presenting false dichotomies. I know for myself personally, I tend to become a very obsessive person. So if I find something I'm interested in, whether it's podcasting or training or jujitsu or a hobby like hunting, that I go all in at the expense of everything else that I have going in. And I get this tunnel vision and focus on this one thing, which can be very good in certain instances. And it could be detrimental in a lot of cases.
Oh, 100%. And again, we talk about certain male traits, but we forget that when they're healthy, they tend to be accompanied by other male traits like temperance, calmness, stillness, consistency, right? And also, and it's fun. I forgot who said this, but someone brought this up. There's this page that I follow. I can't remember the name of it. I'd love to give him a shout out, but very, very good at presenting these things. And he talked about how the man in mainstream media tends to not do this, but if you really think about it, the guy that is really revered among other men is the guy that, for example, just to use an example, the guy that if he wanted to, he could be with any woman that he wants,
Mm-hmm.
but he chooses to be with one, and he values her and he cherishes her. Compare that guy to the guy that, is with every single woman that he wants to be with. Which one will true respect man, right? It's the one that chooses to be with one, but can be with all of them, right? Or the man who if he wanted to, he could kick everybody's ass because he's super tough and whatever, but instead he chooses to be, calm, still, to show mercy, to not display violence unless absolutely necessary. That's the person that gains respect. And you see this even in the animal kingdom among primates. The ones that are the alphas aren't the most violent, evil, terrible ones. They're the ones that work the best with everybody else. Now, if they wanted to, they could lay the smack down, but they don't. They often don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I know this is a bit of a sidetrack, but it's an important conversation for sure.
I really think it is. A lot of guys will talk about other individuals that they see or have an interaction with, and they'll say, that guy's got the X factor. Whether they'll verbalize it or not, they see, right? Like, oh, there's something about that individual. And I've seen men who I'm like, man, what is it about this guy? Like, I'm actually intrigued. Like, I want to be like this man. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's capability. It's the ability to go out and do what needs to be done, but the restraint to not have to prove yourself in every circumstance, in every environment, to get involved in every situation or every argument. Like, there's no need to do that, but only a confident and secure man can do that.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I remember, this is a funny story. My father is somebody that I really look up to. He's a great man, immigrant, came to this country, very poor, uneducated, was able to provide his family with middle-class life, always worked hard, very honest. He was a judo practitioner when he was younger. One of the strongest, naturally strongest people I've ever known in my entire, I've talked about him on my show. It's actually quite comical. Even now, he's got arthritis throughout his whole body because he's been working physical labor since he was a child. He grew up very poor, but the guy is just so strong. It's insane. I remember as a kid, I'll never forget, we were in the car and we were driving somewhere, and there were two guys in another car, and they were acting like assholes. They were, cutting us off and racing and slamming the brakes in front of us. And my dad, I could tell, was getting visibly angry, but he was keeping himself calm. They pulled up next to us. They were trying to make eye contact. My dad stayed very calm, didn't do anything, kept driving. At one point, we pulled up to another stoplight. The guy got out of his car. My dad acted very quickly, got out of his car, grabbed the guy by the shirt and put him on the ground. He's a judo guy, and then held him there. The other guy got up and actually took a step back. My dad didn't beat he could have totally kicked the shit out of the guy. He was obviously scared, realized that he messed with the wrong person, let him up, and the guy went in his car. I remember the amount of respect I had for my father, not just for defending his family, but rather for showing the control that he had. Oh my God. So much better than had he, exploded in the car and yelled and put his family at risk by racing the other car or trying to drive. I'll never forget that. It was an incredible lesson, and it was great because it kind of showed all those things. So, along those lines, it really, you reminded me of it just talking about what we're talking about.
Man, I love stories like that because that's the kind of man I want to be. I want to be the guy who's fully capable of doing what needs to be done, but doesn't need to prove it to some dipshit on the road who has road rage or some woman who's trying to get my attention, or like, that's the kind of guy I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And, to kind of close this loop, there's lots of things that we can do to make ourselves feel capable, to make ourselves feel empowered. Lots of things. There's a broad range of things that we can do to do that. One of the things that we can do, see this, is making ourselves feel physically stable and strong. Just feeling physically stable and strong changes a lot in terms of making us feel more capable. Now, I see that in women because I think women oftentimes don't realize that this is something that they'll notice or they'll feel. But when I would train clients, and I would say 70% of my clients as a trainer were women. They tend to be the ones that hire trainers more often. I'll make a general statement. I think women are a little bit better at asking for help
Sure, no doubt.
than guys do. And so they're the ones most likely to hire trainers. So, yeah, like I said, I worked with a lot of women. And one of the number one most consistent comments I would get, or most reliable comments or feedback I'll get from a woman, is how she would tell me she felt more confident because she felt stronger. I had one woman, she went on a business trip. This after I trained her for a few months. And she came back and she was so excited, she was almost emotional. And she goes, I need to tell you something. I can't tell you how important this is to me. She goes, I travel for business all the time. You know this. And for the first time in years, I lifted my bag and put it in the overhead compartment in the plane. Now, I travel alone all the time, and I always have to ask a guy on the plane to help me with my bag. I didn't have to do that this time. She goes, I can't tell you how that feels. I feel so confident, so capable, right? I had another client. This was much older woman. She was in her late 70s, and she hired me because she was losing her abilities to remain independent. Well, after about a year of training her, I was actually training someone else at this time during a session. She walks in, and at first I was confused because we didn't have a scheduled appointment. And she goes, no, I'm not supposed to work out. She goes, but I need to tell you this. She goes, I was literally next door. So I used to own a studio that was next door to a grocery store. So she had gone grocery shopping. And she says, I was able to close my SUV trunk. So she had a big SUV. She pulled it down by myself. She's like, I haven't been able to do that for 5 years. I have to ask the bagger to help me with that. She goes, I can't tell you how amazing that makes me feel.
Yeah.
In your posture alone with your shoulders back, right? This is from strengthening your body, your shoulders back, your core is more tight. Every step feels more stable, right? A lot of people don't even realize this, Brian, because they've not felt strong for so long that it now becomes, they have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
But I'll tell you, and by the way, this isn't the only thing you can do, but there's so many things you can do to make yourself feel more obviously empowered and capable. But when you become more physically strong, you start to feel more capable. What's funny, not to get political, but I'm about to a little bit. Did you know that there's studies that show that when people work out and lift weights in particular, that their political views start to change and become a little bit more conservative? Did you know that?
I mean, that doesn't surprise me, because it's personal accountability, it's personal responsibility, it's believing in the power of the human spirit. Like that doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh yeah, it's feeling more capable, less vulnerable, right? Less fearful. And like you said, I'm working on myself, so I feel more empowered. I'm accepting what I can't change, but I'm realizing what I can change. By the way,
I'm wondering about that though. Is that like are we measuring the wrong thing? Because do those with conservative political views tend to work out, or is it that those who work out tend to lean more conservative? Like what is the, see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, they actually do they actually have shown studies to show that political views change as people become stronger and more fit. So they go into it feeling one way, and as they become more and more fit, same thing with entrepreneurship, by the way. You become an entrepreneur, you miraculously become a little bit more conservative. And I think that's obviously from your experience of trying to run a business and what that takes. But by the way, this is why, if you haven't noticed this already, everything becomes politicized, right? Exercise and fitness, and in particular, strength training or resistance training, is becoming politicized. They're starting to say things like, if you exercise in a gym, you're fat shaming. You're not you're not accepting yourself. You don't love your body, which is complete opposite.
Right. Or there's probably some, if this hasn't happened already, I'm sure there'll be some sort of thing like if you exercise in a gym, that's because you have some sort of privilege on the back of somebody else. Like I'm sure we'll hear things like that if we haven't already.
Yes, totally. Because it's empowering. When you feel empowered, when you feel strong, when you feel capable, whoever's trying to control you loses that control. So not to say that there aren't conservatives who try to control you as well, but
Sure, of course.
I think it's
well,
that it's the other side that does more of that.
So you're talking about the benefits of getting strong and building muscle, but there's also the aesthetic appeal of it, and not just the appeal to members of the opposite sex, for example. But I mean, look, I had a baseball coach when I was in high school, and he would always say, "If you look good, you play good."
Mm-hmm.
And so he would every year we would have to buy out of our own pocket our own uniforms. The school would provide uniforms for us if we desired, but our baseball coach required that we, out of our own pocket, however we needed to do it, and if we needed help, he would help us, that we would go out every single year and we would buy our own uniforms. And without a doubt, every year we were the best looking team in the region, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And he would always say that if you look good, you play good.
Yeah.
And that's true with your aesthetics. If you've got biceps and you've got abs and the shirts are fitting you right and your pants are right and you're going down a size and maybe your thighs are popping in your jeans because they're making skinny jeans and your thighs don't quite fit in those regular jeans for modern society. Like you're just going to play better. You're going to show up better. You're going to be more effective. You're going to look better to the ladies and also to the men who would be led by you. So there's a lot of benefits from the aesthetic standpoint as well.
There is. And even if you get a little deeper into it and you look at what we consider physically attractive, although a lot of it's been distorted through, plastic surgery and makeup and clothing and all that stuff, the roots are really rooted in health. It's all rooted in health, right? So what looks healthy, even though we may distort some of that, tends to be what's considered most attractive. So what looks healthy in a man? A shoulder to waist ratio. There's a particular shoulder to waist ratio, right? Smaller waist, wider shoulders.
Right. It's that triangle shape, that upside down triangle.
Yes. More muscle, less body fat. By the way, you don't have to be shredded and be unhealthy lean, but have a general lean physique, good posture, signs of healthy testosterone. What about women, right? With women, there's a certain amount of curve that's considered attractive. By the way, that comes from muscle. You build your butt, you build your hamstrings, gives you some of that curve. Good posture, that's another one. Healthy hormone levels, that's another one, right? How do you accomplish all of this in the best way possible? Well, you become healthy. You eat right. You become mentally, psychologically, spiritually healthy. You lift some weights. You work out a little bit, and yeah, it's gonna make you appear more attractive to the opposite sex. But there's also that internal thing that's happening as well, which is, look, here's the deal. Whether you believe, we're a soul with a body or not, at the end of the day, our body, our senses are a filter for the world. And my own experience, when I'm sick, things are more negative. Bad news is worse. Good news isn't as good. I don't feel as positive, right? When I'm healthy and feeling vibrant, bad news, not so bad. Good news is even better, right? It's a filter. So if you're healthy and you're fit, you're more likely to view things positively. You're more likely to overcome challenges, or at least look at challenges like you're able to overcome them. I think one thing that we're not looking at right now, and I talk about this whenever they try to push the vegan movement on everybody, which I think is a terrible idea. I think for most people doing that would be a bad idea, is I tell people, we're not counting the cost of poor health on healthcare, which by the way threatens to bankrupt us. But we're also we're also not looking at something else that nobody ever counts. Healthy people produce better and innovate better and solve problems better. Unhealthy people are way worse at all of that stuff. And the most valuable things that humans do, I think, arguably, is innovation and production. and if we're all unhealthy and obese and we don't feel good, our hormones are off and we're medicated, we're just not going to do those things as well.
I agree. I agree, man. I know there's a lot to be said on this. And, what's interesting is we didn't really get into like the workouts and the movements. And because I think the conversations that you and I can have based on our past conversations are so much more valuable than the workout. Like you can go buy the book and get the workouts, but I really want to get to the root of the issue. And I think we did a great job explaining that to the guys. I mean, it's been very valuable. I know there's a lot of men who are going to get a lot of value from what we talked about today.
Well, in the book, a majority of it is spent on some of the stuff that we're talking about right now. So I talk about why resistance training is the most valuable form of exercise, why we haven't considered it for a long time, what the studies are showing now, how it affects your hormones. This small part of the book is here's some exercises and workouts you can do if you need some structure. But really the majority of it is I'm making the case. Here's why. If you only have 2 or 3 days a week that you can devote to exercise and you want to not be obese, you want to make this easier on yourself, you want to have better hormone levels, you want to improve your longevity, and like most people, you're not going to do tons of forms of exercise. You're probably only going to pick one. Why resistance training is the form of exercise you should pick. And then I do go into how to do it properly and that kind of stuff. But a majority of it is talking kind of about what we're talking about right now. So it's a great book for that. It's a good book for people. If there's people if you know this already and you've been trying to convince someone that this is what they need to do, and they're in that old mindset and they think, oh, that's just for bodybuilders or meatheads, give them this book. It'll do a good job of convincing them otherwise.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, tell us how we connect with you. Obviously, we can pick up a copy of the Resistance Training Revolution wherever you can get a book. But tell me about Mind Pump. Tell me about where to connect with you so the guys know exactly where to go.
Yeah, no problem. So obviously Mind Pump is the podcast that I host. You can find us on YouTube or any podcast platform. If you want to find me directly, you can go on Instagram. Mind Pump Sal is where you'll find me. And that's pretty much it.
Right on, man. We're going to sync it all up. I appreciate our friendship over the past 4 years. I was thinking about it the other day. We met, I think, for the first time at the Spartan Race Pod Fest or whatever they called it. I don't know what they called it. And you guys were gracious enough to invite me up to the house that you guys had rented out. And man, our friendship over the past couple of years has been awesome to see you guys grow, to know that we're growing over here and to see what both of us are doing. Similar missions, different vein, both, I think, really, really important for the guys who are tuning in. So, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship.
Yeah, I love what you do, man. It's and it's so important. It's more important today than any other time I can remember. So keep doing what you're doing. And I predict the pushback is going to get really, really bad and hard against some of the stuff that, you promote and talk. Stay strong, keep doing what you're doing. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know.
Right on. Bring it on. You and I are both preparing for it. So bring it on. It should be a good battle, if anything else. But
yes.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks.